Imagine setting yourself apart from the competition because your organization is always secure, always available, and always ahead of the curve. That's NetGain Technologies, your total one source for cybersecurity, IT support, and technology planning. Picture picking up the phone and having decades of technology and cybersecurity expertise on the other end, like a bat phone, but with a team of specialists ready to make your business faster, easier, and more profitable. Since 1984, NetGain Technologies has designed, built, and implemented customized technology solutions for businesses of all kinds. They offer a clear roadmap and security plan to keep threats at bay, all at a predictable, affordable monthly cost. NetGain Technologies supports organizations across the United States, providing the benefits of a fully staffed in-house IT department and security team at a fraction of the cost. Get peace of mind. Get competitive. Get NetGain. Contact NetGain today at 844-777-6278 or reach out online at netgainit.com. That's netgainit.com and get ahead of your competition today. Hey, welcome everybody to Cybercrime Junkies. I am your host, David Mauro, and in the studio today is returning guest and cybersecurity expert Ryan Leirvik with Neuvik. Ryan, welcome back, sir.
Thank you, David. Great to be here.
I always enjoy talking to you. I think since the last time we spoke, generative AI has made a massive splash. It didn't take up the social media feeds like it does now, because like everybody everywhere has like AI infused into it. You know, like, oh, we make the chains that connect the pens that are attached to the desk. There's AI infused. And I'm like, how in the world is there AI involved in that chain? But anyway, I digressed. So like welcome, sir.
Thank you. Great to be here. Yeah, it's like my refrigerator has AI enabled.
Yes,
wonderful. Exactly. But the beauty of this is that it's kind of taken a little bit of attention away from like the hype of cybersecurity for a while.
Yeah.
So there is a silver lining in a way.
It's true.
Yeah,
because if we didn't have vendors saying, if you buy this box, you would be totally secure. If we didn't have that in the world, then it wouldn't be a regular day in cybersecurity.
Exactly. Now we have buy this box and it comes with its own AI.
Now it has AI.
Wonderful.
So it'll keep you secure even better.
That's right. It'll know to be secure before you even think about security.
It'll know what's coming even before the bad guys know what's coming.
Yeah.
So walk us through, like, for people that may not realize. So walk us through what is Neuvik and who are the clients and services that you guys serve and provide to those clients.
Oh, great. Yeah. So for those listening, Neuvik is a cybersecurity services company. So pure play services. So we put people on keyboard doing red teaming, pen testing, and risk. We always tie it up with risk management, which means what did we find and why does that matter to you, right?
Which is fantastic. So, I mean, you guys actually employ ethical hackers that are certified and background checked and everything else. They get to commit felonies like against a company because it's allowed, right? I'm teasing about the felony part because, I mean, but otherwise, if they weren't engaged, it could be, right? Like they are going to break in and then show the companies their vulnerabilities and then see where that sits in their risk management maturity assessment, essentially.
That's exactly right. In fact, we think of it like this. The vulnerabilities exist, right? They're there. The question is, how long have they been there, right? So you can either have a developer that mitigate it in development, which is the right spot, right? That's why we've spent a lot of time in training, software development lifecycle. But a lot of times those miss the manual and other type testing, static code testing, push to production. Then it gets into your customer environment. Right. And in there you have integration testing, right? Deployment testing, just to make sure what vulnerabilities can create there. Then they get pushed to actual production and in use. And you have kind of two options at that point, right? One is you're either going to find the vulnerability, internally, hopefully that'd be great, or a customer is going to tell you about it, or you'll get it at some sort of pen test or red teaming. That's where we come in, right? Or the FBI is going to call you, or you'll find it on the dark net, right? So we try to catch it before, right?
Before all of that happens.
That's right.
Well, yeah, and when you think about it, some of the, especially when you get into the code in the production stage before it winds up in a customer environment, that is so critical because we've seen massive supply chain issues in the last couple of years. I always think of the MoveIt breach, right? And how that just caught fire, right? And then you had the Clop ransomware gang, not even worrying about ransomware, just living off the land and just exploiting that vulnerability everywhere that tool was installed.
These deep supply
really
chain,
damaging.
They do, and these deep supply chain, third party risk. It's kind of third party. I conflate third party risk and supply chain. They're different physically, but they're all in the same boat because they're
very similar.
Yeah, they're not internal. But the issue is, we rely on software in this case to do what we intended to do. But there's this trust but verify model that we believe in, which is trust that it works, but verify that there aren't any gaping holes or vulnerabilities in there that you're then pushing out to your base or your customer base, right? That you will rely on without discovering the vulnerabilities in the development stage, be it some library that you borrowed from somewhere else, or pieces of code that you put together that are configured with 2 or 3 different sources. Before you push to production, if you're not testing for it, that vulnerability could be existing for a long time, right? Yeah. And then it's just a matter of time. And the issue, David, really becomes the longer that vulnerability exists without catching it, much more of a hassle and the much more of a cost it is to deal with it.
Absolutely.
Right? So it makes sense to hit it in production.
Yeah, because but I mean, isn't that true of so many aspects of cybersecurity? They're like, people tend to just avoid it, pay the minimum amount of budgetary assessment toward it, and just assume that it's not going to happen to them. And then when it happens, it is like 100 times more costly than had they just infused some preventative. I mean, not that 100% of preventative measures would stop it, right? But we've seen it stops a lot of things, and it at least mitigates it and limits the impact once things happen.
Exactly. Yeah, it's
it's really about risk. It's really, I mean,
it is.
I'm still shocked. I mean, I'm doing several public speaking events next week, and it's a lot of it is just the stats are overwhelming. Like it's and so we always approach it educationally and not just with shock and awe and not just fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but like, what can we do about it? But I mean, we all had fire drills as kids, right? That was for a reason, obviously. And yet we build these multi-million-dollar brands and we don't ever practice about what would happen if there's a data breach. I don't understand that, right? It's still something that really needs improved.
Yeah, it's remarkable, isn't it? Just to tease that out for a minute, lax security leads to exploitable vulnerabilities, right? Yeah. Under budget or misappropriate funding leads to lax security. And so, when we don't look at the fundamentals on, all right, there's some risk threshold there of like how much budget is enough to get to what level of, confidence in our systems. And every single organization looks at that differently, as they should.
Of course, because each one has a different risk appetite, right?
Exactly.
Or, like they all want to do that. But when they do nothing or they do just very minimal, I don't know that they're aware that they are flying their plane without landing gear, without parachutes, without enough fuel. Like, I don't think that they're aware of it.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey everyone, did you ever want to ask us a question directly or communicate, give us feedback, make suggestions, whatever it is, you can now do that direct. There's a link in the show notes right at the top where you can text us directly, come communicate with us right here in the podcast studio, or you can text the number 904-867-4466 and text the number 201-4652 and leave your message. That is 904-867-4466 or text the number 204-4652 and leave your message. We look forward to talking to you soon.
That may be the issue. And that's where a little bit of demonstration could come in. Because look, most people are running a business. Let's just be very general here. Like most organizations exist for a specific mission. And that mission is to do whatever it is, right? And typically in the US, it's mostly, gain market share or revenue, right? In some way, shape or form. I mean, even nonprofits want market share, right? They want to penetrate the market.
Yep.
So in there is not, hey, let's do it securely with all companies. Some companies do, and many companies are focused on security, but not everybody does. So the question really is, this is where the thinking, where I've seen it work, is the thinking gets baked into somewhere in the executive team says, hey, where is the risk? Like, what's going to take us out somewhere that we otherwise wouldn't expect? And do we even know about it? Right? Because you can't expect everybody to know. You can't hardly expect anybody to know about everything about IT, much less security. So as an example, for those that don't see it, even if they're in the industry, sometimes it's helpful to give a demonstration just so they understand what's really at risk. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about.
You mentioned So I go to banking associations, and part of the reason why a lot of people in security attend banking associations is it's the first vertical of all the verticals: healthcare, legal, right, schools, etc. But it's the first vertical that is like, you won't get your money from the feds at a good enough rate if you aren't compliant, right? And compliance is not security, but compliance is kind of the evidence that certain security controls were met at a certain period of time. But that industry is really the forefront for America, at least, in embracing more security standards. So we tend to all bump around those associations. So as we were talking about AI and deepfake, before we began, in your last session to one of these associations, did you deepfake yourself, or what did you do?
Oh, this is great. Yeah, so tying these two together, this is where demonstrations really help. So yeah, the situation was invited to go talk to a banking conference on deepfakes, AI, and the ability to commit fraud. So sitting back and thinking about it for a minute, I thought, well, in the industry, we talk a lot about this, right? We write policy about it. We think about it, but have we actually seen it? Do we know what the real impact is? So we decided, let's do it. And so one of our researchers here at Neuvik, with no background in AI, by the way, curiosity, but zero background, we pointed them towards a bank account and said, look, create a deepfake that does these things. 1, gets access to the account. 2, closes it down, and actually 3 things. And 3, sends a check to an unregistered address or something they don't have in the profile. Let's see if we can do that using, generative AI to create effectively a deepfake.
And like commercial grade generative AI. This isn't like NSA level stuff, right?
Wait for this. This is the best part. So we did, and it worked. It took about a minute and a half.
So disturbing.
We recorded it, and so we played it at the event to say, look, who here has seen an actual deepfake work in real life? Okay, great. Here, of the large crowd, only a very small fraction, like 1% to 2% at most, had seen one. So we're like, look, let's change that. Let's show you what this actually does. So we did. It was successful. Account closed. Balance of account sent to another address not on file, right? So, clearly very easy action on objective.
All flags that should have been quashed.
We passed every single authentication capability and check for the entire process, right? And here's the interesting thing. Yeah, but here's the interesting thing to get to your commercial grade side. It took this person who had no background in it whatsoever. It took them, I think it was $11 for commercial, just to buy a day's license for the generative AI tool and train it properly, right? all publicly available information, 1 hour worth of video off of
like a YouTube or something. They have,
exactly,
right? Just so that they can get their voice down.
And $11 and 8 full hours. That's it.
Unbelievable.
And
that's unbelievable. Now, was it? Walk us through the attack. So, is it a social engineering call? Was it that along with an email? Like how did the compromise occur?
Yeah, single point social engineering call center. Yeah. So step one was
acting like they were an employee,
acting like they were the customer. So
acting like they were the customer calling. So from the outside, the customer calling. That's what I assumed. I just didn't know if there was an inside angle. So acting like they were a customer calling the help desk.
Calling,
and as the help desk would ask questions, they would type in the answer. The AI would spit out the answer.
Exactly, with the proper inflections and tone.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, to bypass the authentication mechanisms, all of them.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, what I was trying to demonstrate for people is how advanced it's gotten in just the last 6 months. I mean, 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I discovered deep fakes. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. 10, 15 years from now, right? Fast forward just a few years. And just in the last 6 months, it has gotten so remarkable. So I went to 11 Labs, or I forgot what vendor it was, but I did a sample of my voice and I got it deepfake, because in podcasting, we'll use it for even on the Riverside platform, they'll let you do an AI sample of your voice. It can never be used for social engineering or anything bad. But the reason you do it is that way when you're editing in, you don't have to say and boot up your whole studio each time you just want to put in a word when you're editing the transcript later, right? And so they do this. But I played with it a while, and then I called my son and I typed in the answers, and he's like, well, Dad, yeah. Hey, of course. And it totally fooled him. Completely fooled him. But then after a while, he's like, no, I can tell. He's like, because he knew, I talk too much. So I think he knew I was playing with it anyway. And so he's like, it sounds just a little bit off, right? But it's my son. It's somebody that I talk to every day. So it did work for a little while, though. Which was
so that was it. The timeline worked properly, up to a certain point where then cognitively he's like, wait a minute, hang on.
But a help desk doesn't know who the person is. They just know a little bit about them. Right.
Yeah, they only know what's on they only know typically what's on the screen unless you do relationship banking, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's it. And reality is, to your point of why it's accelerated so fast, that's exactly what, machine learning and AI is kind of doing, right? It's collapsing the timeline between, what you can automate, what you want to automate, and the insights you want to get there usually take time, and that's just gotten collapsed. And the speed of which it's now commercially available.
Well, there are some phenomenal benefits to this, right? People that have medical treatments where they lose their voice, they can capture their voice, still talk in their voice to their family. It's got, memory preservation of capabilities. It's got healthcare benefits. There's a lot of good that is going to come from this. And then there's a lot of, in the world we live in, it just made the Wild West have Terminator level guns now.
And that's our world. In the world of technology writ large, right? I usually think of it in terms of yin and yang, right? For as much good as the technology brings, it opens up the capability to bring just that much bad.
Absolutely.
Right. But there's so much good that machine learning helps. I mean, look at the vaccines distribution and the ability to identify quickly broad public health issues, right? Not to mention, corporate intellectual property protection or creation. There's so many things that the ability to take data sets, glean insights from them, and produce those insights in a material way that helps advance, sort of, the human race, if you will, are tremendous. The challenge is the world we live in is the first thing we think of is how is this going to break and how is this going to be used against people?
Right. Exactly.
I mean, that's kind of our world.
That's what's going to happen at work. And we're like, oh, no.
And that's the security community. It's like, wait a minute, we're the skeptics sitting around going, I can see how that might be used by a criminal, right?
Yes.
So, and in our world, we want to split those two and say, all right, let
anything
us be
that's
the
going to
people.
involve litigation eventually is going to be a mess, right? And as soon as you see that, and you're like, the lawsuits and the class action lawsuits and all that stuff, it's just it's so harmful for the economy, for society. Like, it's just, if we could just reduce some of it, we can just keep building the good stuff, right?
Exactly. Yeah, so that's it. Or bake security in there at every level, or at the most important levels where you need them, right?
Absolutely.
Like, where are the critical inflection points, and where do you need to check to make sure there's nothing glaringly bad that's you're going to push out to production, to use it. And that's the hard part. And just to take a quick step back, with like that type of, a generative AI deep fake, now think about how hard that is for call centers and organizations who haven't been able to think this through. And by the way, a lot of times can be, very widely distributed and, from an organizational standpoint, and the multiple connection points in which it takes, an organization could be entered through from a call center or a client-facing, location. And all of a sudden, you've just made this problem of authentication really hard for almost every organization, quite frankly. There's no immediate quick fix for it, but it just exacerbates the problem of trying to, provide a service to your clients and authenticate them without slowing down the very thing that they're trying to accomplish by calling the call center. Right.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and that's, we saw it in MGM and Caesar's breach. Right?
Exactly.
Scattered Spider called, working alongside the Russian ransomware gangs, but they were doing the social engineering, doing their OSINT, making sure a certain person with great knowledge of who they were trying to be makes the call, socially engineers, and resets their MFA or resets their device, and they get into the system. And then from there, they unleash the ransomware gang. So that's where you get loose groups that are excellent at social engineering, like Scattered Spider, shoring up with the Black Hats of the world and the Lockbits of the world. And it's a formidable foe, as the FBI says.
It is. It's very formidable. And speaking of technology that helps, that can be used for good and for bad. I mean, where did they find out that the individual was part of the, could be at the call center and know who they are? LinkedIn. Right.
Yep.
You have this great platform. They've had their own troubles with security here and there, but hey, I want to connect with certain professional individuals.
It seems like LinkedIn, and we could always edit this out later, but it seems like they haven't had as many problems with security as they've had with bots scraping the data and then selling that, or claiming that they have a sales tool that can access things, and it's stuff like that. It's more about being abused than anything else.
So now the issue, that's exactly it. The issue has become data.
Right.
Data. If we remember the movie The Great Hack, I won't say her name, but one of the primary principals there that worked at Cambridge Analytica said, like, the price of data is more than the price of oil. I mean, we've kind of been following that kind of concept for a while. I don't have any empirical evidence on that, but individuals' data and look what, just today, they were just, at some point this week or just now, the FTC just fined, the large service providers for using personal data of users and non-users. So you get a platform like LinkedIn, and they had early days, they didn't salt their hashes, and, they had issues with encryption, and but the security days seem to be sort of, far behind them. I mean, anything can happen tomorrow, but it's more about the collection of individual personal
and managing
data.
the data. Yeah.
Managing the data. That's it. Look at, I'm not going to call them all out here, but you know the offenders. And it's, the challenge here, the real problem is, look, in America, we're a capitalist society.
Right. And for business, we want the data for the business decision makers. We want to know what they're doing and who they are and how to contact them, etc. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, there's a lot of data that we don't know that is being collected on us.
Sure.
And to that point, it is more, and it's being sold and packaged to people that we're not aware of. And so, again, it kind of crosses, to me, I view it almost like the right of privacy, like physical privacy, right? Like if you're alone in your bedroom, like you have a belief that you are private, right?
Yeah.
If you're alone in your bedroom and it's outside and it's all glass windows and there's a big party over there, that you're not private, even though you are in your room, right?
Yeah.
But what's happening to us is they're like exposing the walls and doing stuff and repackaging and taking pictures of us and all that stuff without us even knowing it, right? Like we had no idea.
Yeah. Well, think about Facebook back in up to 2016, 2018. If you downloaded the app and you used the app, it would pull data on users and non-users.
Right.
And so there's this interesting thing that we kind of live in here in America, which is like, it's really hard to keep your data private and protected.
It is very hard.
You have to work really hard to do it because we put, I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's bad. I don't really want to take a position on this. I have my own personal views. I'm not going to share them publicly, but like, you can probably tease them out. But the reality is like, we put business and, either market share or growth, first, and not the consumer or the individual. In fact, a lot of the interesting thing, we used to say this back in the day, is like, hey, if you can't figure out the business model, it's probably you.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, and if it's free, if the apps are free, then you are the product.
Precisely.
It's exactly right. Like you are the product. Everything you like, everything you scroll, when you stop scrolling, how long you stay on there, what you're looking at, who you're looking at, who you're connecting, what you're clicking through and then going to, all of that has value to people. It's looking for intents. It's looking for what they like. And it's based on it is part of your insurance rates. It's part of your healthcare rates and all of that. And meanwhile, us Americans are just TikToking ourselves, showing our houses all along, right? Like showing pictures of our kitchens, everything, like just sharing it. And we just have a view that, it doesn't really matter compared to our brothers and sisters in Europe. And maybe it's cultural or maybe it's historic, right? Because World War II is just not that long ago, like in the grand scheme of things. And they still have relatives that experienced that and they know what happened when people can make harsh decisions based on who they think you are on some list. And
that's it. I always think of these things about systems and systems thinking, right? That's what drives the culture, right? And over there, it's, they want to put the individual first. And just the reality is, it doesn't necessarily need to center around what you're doing with the data. Just give the person the option to opt in or out, right? A conscious decision about where, the data is being used. I think that's more of the argument there. Here, the argument is more of, it's, the system isn't designed to protect the individual, right? It's
correct.
Let's not even get into the election cycles, but again, back to
the election cycles and deepfakes would be an entire episode series, frankly. You could just go into data, misinformation, AI deepfakes, both political parties. You could just go on and on.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
We are proud to be sponsored by Kiteworks, a secure content platform for CMMC compliance. Kiteworks is FedRAMP Moderate authorized and helps accelerate your path to CMMC 2.0 compliance. Did you know Kiteworks puts defense contractors on the fastest path to meeting CMMC 2.0 requirements, leveraging the same zero trust framework guidance used for federal requirements? Kiteworks supports nearly 90% of the security requirements for CMMC 2.0 Level 3. This can drastically reduce the effort and costs associated with obtaining CMMC 2.0 authorization. What's really cool to us is Kiteworks has an ongoing bounty program and regular penetration testing to minimize vulnerabilities along with one-click appliance updates. Kiteworks provides unparalleled ease of use with its intuitive web UI, mobile apps, and even Outlook integration. This user-friendly experience avoids productivity disruptions during your CMMC 2.0 implementation. Accelerate your CMMC 2.0 compliance and address federal zero trust requirements with Kiteworks' universal, secure file sharing platform made for defense contractors. Visit kiteworks.com to get started. That's kiteworks.com to get started today.
Yeah. But the challenge, just like privacy, the challenge is most consumers, if you're consuming your information from, let's just say broadly, social media, not, news outlets, let's just draw the line there. Right. You may not be aware of how much of that information is just fundamentally not real.
Correct.
Right. And quite frankly, structured to keep you engaged. Again, back to you become the business model. So the privacy argument there is just like, most you can't expect most consumers to, sort of follow the, caveat emptor of like, buyer beware, right? But you should be able to, from an ethical standpoint, say, look, we're going to use your data. Here's how we're going to use it. You okay with this? And just give them the ability to opt in, because you can see a world where most don't even think about it. They kind of operate in this false sense of trust. Yep. And, but that's where the challenge becomes, what are you actually using it for? And then are you taking my data, or are you taking the data of my contact list, right? Who I'm writing, what I'm writing. I mean,
well, and are you, when you click agree on the T's and C's,
did you
for
read
an
it?
app, right? Nobody reads those, right? You would have to quit your job and drop out of school and never see your family if you were going to read all that stuff. And half the time, what you don't realize is that it is, they're granting so much more permission than they need really to run that app. Like they're, capturing keystrokes, capturing what you do on other apps. Even like, it still shocks me that they're able to do that. But meanwhile,
it's
we
continuing.
just let them do that.
No, of course. Yeah. And this is why the system's thinking so. It all starts with regulation, right? It all starts with like, look, just the system we work in is, we're a constitutional republic, right? So we vote for our public leaders, right? And then the question there is, all right, do we vote for the people that are going to stand up for things we want or not, right? That's our choice. But it starts there with legislation and say, hey, look, we're going to protect our constituents, and this is what that looks like, or we won't, and here's what that looks like. But it's got to start there, right? In Europe, they have it because for the reasons you point out, right? There are things there that, are they're very sensitive, and they put it first for maybe cultural reasons. But it does start with legislation. Like I'll tell you what's really interesting for me. I've been spending a lot of time flying back and forth to Europe over the last year. Are you
guys moving there? Is your company moving there? Are you guys moving there?
We've got a headquarters there now.
Wow.
So we're truly global.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
But the cool thing is when you land, depending on the airline you're in, right, they'll say, all right, we're getting ready to land in whatever airport. They're like, you're in Europe now. You're not allowed to anytime you take a picture on this airplane with any other individuals, you must get their permission first. That's an announcement that the airline makes before you land. And at first, it kind of takes you,
So that's interesting. Is that something new? I mean, I've traveled to Europe before, but not in the last year or two. So like, is that something new that they say now? Like,
so I don't know as the actual
I wonder if it's a
regulation.
GDPR implementation, right?
Yeah, so I don't know the specifics, but I can tell you my experience. So in the past 7 months, I've flown to 5 European countries, 2 of them 3 times. And every time before I'm landing, that announcement comes on.
Wow.
Yeah. And it is the same airline, so maybe it's just, no, that's not true. It was 2 different airlines. And, the first time I heard it, I thought, wow, that's really interesting. I wonder why that is. And then by the time you hear it the third and the fourth time, like, okay, yeah, this is a regulation issue. This wasn't just a one-time thing. But what's interesting about culture, right? It starts to shift your mindset, right? Into like, oh yeah, you've now brought into my awareness the privacy of others. When I've got a device in my hand that I could capture everything. And
without them even being aware of it.
Without them being aware. And by the way, we're landing in an international airport from another location. It's like, maybe some of these people don't want to be known that they're there. Maybe some of these people, right? Like, and it's not my right to expose that, right? They have
when they make the announcement, is it when you're in this country you can't do it, or is it while you're on the grounds of the airport? So
this is great. Now you're really parsing it, because I don't really know. They say, just as a reminder, if you take any video or audio, you must get, or take any pictures, you must get permission from the people before you take a picture. That's what they say. They don't get geolocation
so they don't limit
specific.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, now that we're talking about it, I should really look it up and be like, all right, why are they doing that?
Yeah, it's actually
just
kind
sort
of
an observation. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it makes perfect sense. And like in America, it's like, feel free to fire up those phones. Like, take pictures. If you got anybody like in any compromising thing, please videotape it and throw it up on social media.
And this is the interesting thing. So now let's play this whole thing out, right? You have facial recognition software. It's pretty easy to find out who's who now, right? I mean, there's so many places to go to find out.
Yeah, and there's cameras everywhere. There's cameras
everywhere that can push public information. Everybody has got a device. Almost everybody, like most people, have a device in their. And how many times you've gone to a concert, right, or something where there's a stage.
Well, gone are the days of like a lighter. Right. Everybody just holds up their phone with the flashlight.
Which is its own interesting thing, because it's like, or recording it, and you're all sitting here watching the show, and everybody's recording it. So like this one event has just created tens of thousands of minutes of content just for this one event. So think of that as just one event. Now think of that happening all the time, almost everywhere, not to that scale.
Right.
And think about where that goes. That is extremely important data, because what happens if something happens at that venue? Or what if you're trying to find somebody? Or what? Like you now have massive amount of, well, it's large data to sort through, but using like facial recognition technology, you can, if you have access to the data, right, you can parse it and try to find out, is it there? Now you have to scrape a lot of stuff to do that.
But you could still drill down and then draw conclusions or find that. Last time we spoke, what I loved about your book was just the storytelling and the translating in business terms. So what are you seeing when you're speaking with business owners? And are your organization is mostly in the enterprise space, or are you in the SMB space, like the mid-market? Who are the business owners that you guys generally deal with? Just generally.
First, full commercial. We work across all verticals. Largely big enterprise, but we love SMB because small businesses become big businesses. And earlier you can think about security. It's actually less costly to start early than it is to start later.
Right. Absolutely. That's good. So what are some of the things you're hearing from business leaders, especially in that mid-tier or that growing SMB space? Like, what are they struggling with? Like, what do you find you have to translate the most? Is it just the balance between convenience and security, or the balance between productivity and security, or the cost? Like, what are the big challenges that you're seeing? I always want to ask that people that are actually working in the industry.
Yeah, there are 2 main challenges that I see almost every time. for those kind of getting started. One is, what is this actual problem? I don't understand it at all. And two, what questions do I need to even ask to understand? Do we have the proper controls in place, or just what I need to do about it? Those two things, what is this and what do I need to do about it? Just getting their head around those two things are the two questions that I see almost at every level, right? There are a variety of different steps inside of there, right? So from the understanding side, it's like, do I really understand?
Great viewpoint. No one has ever actually synthesized it like that. And I don't know why. But I think that was really good. Easy. No, it's so true. Like, what is the problem we're really trying to solve? And like, what questions do I have to ask in order to find the solution?
Exactly.
It's brilliant. Yeah. It's really good. I knew there's a reason I invited you on this show again. That is fantastic.
I'm flattered by that.
That's really good, man.
Yeah, thanks. It's that's it. Like, every time, no matter what level of executive we're talking to, right? They have a different understanding of what the problem actually is. Right. And then, of course, given that different understanding, they have a different, an inability, or just, these are smart people, but maybe they just don't know how to ask the right questions because they may or may not have exposure to the whole system. Right. And one of the ways you can tell right away is how they discuss risk. Right. So what's my risk of ransomware? Like, okay, well, it's not a risk. Ransomware is a technique, right? That's a threat. Are you vulnerable to it? That's the question to ask. And so, just working down through
how vulnerable, how do you measure it, right?
Exactly.
And measuring risk is hard in any field. In cybersecurity as a whole, now there are exceptions. There's great books that use like all these formulas, a whole bunch of math to figure it out. And I was like really getting into the book, and then they got into all this math, and I'm like, I got to call Ryan because this is too much math for me. Like, took math for the Grateful Dead in college. That's why I got my law degree, not my MBA. And I'm just teasing, but it's kind of true. But it was a lot because you've got all the formulas that really to measure it. But as a whole in the industry, we really haven't done that great of a job of translating that measurable quantitative amount, right? Because it's still, HR can say 10% of our workforce is looking for another job. Sales can say we are going to hit our targets, or if we miss them, we will miss them by 7% this quarter. And then cybersecurity goes, we're yellow. Like, it's a yellow risk. It's not green. It's not red, but we're kind of yellow. And I'm like, as an executive, and I've owned businesses, and I'm like, hey, I need a little bit more than yellow. Like, you gotta, I'm paying a lot of money. I want more than yellow.
Yeah.
And they do more than that. We all do more than that, but it's tough, isn't it? Because every business is different. Every configuration is different. The way they're leveraging technology is different. Where they have their data is different. What their risk appetite, like we talked about before, is different. And so all of those are factors that go into those formulas.
100%. And what problem are we actually solving for? Right, is also the question of, what risk are we trying to identify? It's different. What makes it so complicated is it's different than other industries, formal industries like, finance, accounting, the language of business, right? Even marketing. There are specific measures you can get to see, like, what is the actual goal I'm after? What data do I need, to identify whether I'm moving towards that goal, right? And then how do I adjust based on where I am with that goal? So in finance, it's how much debt, how much equity do I have, right? In accounting, right, it's, do my assets equal my liabilities in owner's equity, right? In marketing, it's I want outreach and exposure. Okay, great. How many clicks did you get, right? You have these empirical data sets that you can actually draw on. And then, of course, the closest thing to cyber risk kind of is the insurance industry. But they've got years of empirical data, decades, almost millennia of like empirical data based on weather patterns. If you're in the property insurance game, right? It's like, okay, what's the probability of a hurricane or some catastrophic event?
But that industry has really struggled with ascertaining risk in cybersecurity, haven't they? They really have.
And here's what's interesting.
And so they really focus on the application process and really honing in on that and saying, we have to have these. I mean, it's similar to what the auto insurance carriers did in the 70s and 80s. Like you have to have insurance now. You have to have seat belts. You have to have a certain, ABS brakes, whatever, and you get discounts for all of those things.
Yep.
It's kind of like the more controls you have when you submit your application, the more effort you're doing to manage your risk, the lower your premiums would be.
Yeah, exactly. I always like the phrase that I always like to hear or say. I've heard it somewhere else. So I'm going to borrow it from somebody else. You get what you inspect.
That's all we do here at
exactly.
Junkies.
I wanted to say it, and I was like, I didn't make this up, so I got to find out who actually. But reality is, you get what you inspect, not what you expect.
Yes.
You can expect whatever you want. That's all good. But unless you inspect it and find out what's actually going on, well, then you have data to work on.
Right.
In our world, the question is, are you solving the right problem? Right? So the thing about measuring risk that I've always found is you have to set a goal somewhere, right? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to accomplish, security of all things? Okay, that's going to be really hard. But why not break it apart into digestible, mutually exclusive pieces, right? So number one thing in this is my view, but the number one thing in security is know what you own and then know how important that is to you. We do the same thing in our daily lives, right? It's much more difficult at the corporate level. I mean, except, wildly different. But if we know what we own and then we know how to protect, why that's important, now you know what's important to protect, right? That's a great starting point. So the question is, all right, here are my list of really important assets that my business relies on to do the business, right? So if I lost confidence in these assets, if they were compromised, the integrity, confidentiality, availability of these assets were affected in some way, my business would suffer at some level, right? Either monetarily, it's always going to come down to some monetary, number, right? We don't have to get too much in the calculus and the math, right? But the framing is know what you own, know why that is important, and then put protective measures around it, right? As a starting point.
That's exactly right. Because that allows them to create a reasonable roadmap.
That's right.
Because
you know what you're protecting.
Yeah. And so often they don't know what the problem is that they're trying to solve because they're bought in by vendors. And I say vendors, but I mean vendors that have like the one size fits all box or whatever it is. That's like, this will keep you secure.
Yes.
And I'm like, really? Your guys at your company would love to blow up that box, right? Or bring that box to DEF CON. And after about an hour, I want to see how alive that box is, right? Because it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, we used to love the phrase, when somebody says, this is totally secure.
Yeah.
Look at them like, you're at a security conference.
Yeah, dude.
I mean, we can poke holes in that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But there is that. And that doesn't help necessarily solve the problem, right?
No.
And so this is what makes it really hard for, executives and managers to try to figure out like where do I point? Because imagine yourself in that position, right? Like, okay, I'm in this corporate entity. I have to protect, I have to keep us safe at some level. I don't know exactly what that level is, but I have a general sense of what that is. I mean, I'm talking about most organizations, like some organizations have a very clear mandate on what safe and security looks like. But generally here, imagine yourself in this position. You have to think through, wow, I have to protect all these things. And oh, by the way, I have to report on it. I have to tell people what I'm doing. I have to go get a budget. I have to show some sort of return on that budget, right? I have to justify the budget if I can't show a return, right? And I need to get it organized in some sort of roadmap so that I can at least articulate what it is that I need and why to another group of individuals or multiple groups of individuals that have no idea what I'm even talking about. So I got to use no terms that say cyber, vulnerabilities, threats, ransomware, right? Different types of threat groups or threat intelligence. And next thing you know, I've lost them. And so the way I've seen that work is just, what is important to the business to do the business? Right? First question is, do you know it? Because most organizations don't, and it's not by, their own necessarily fault. Is, from the systems engineering side, there may not have been a good asset management system started in the beginning because the mandate was go
and shadow IT and all this other stuff.
Oh my gosh!
In. I mean, it's just everybody's trying new apps, and companies are out there saying don't use AI. Meanwhile, people are like, okay, we won't use AI. Meanwhile, they're using AI, right? Like, of course they're going to use it.
Exactly.
So
yeah,
man,
I know. And but here's one of the
so good. That boils it down so well. Like, what are the problem you're trying to solve? What questions do you have to ask to find the solutions to that, right? Like having that, what data are you trying to protect? Where is it? Where is it kept? Right?
Yeah.
And then how do you protect it? Because it can't just be, well, I'm trying to protect a massive a massive data breach. Okay, but what about fraud? What about fraud? What about insider risk? What about there's so many other aspects to risk, right?
Yeah. And then now flip it, right? What's the one thing you really need to be able to do well? Like, let's say you don't do any of this. Let's say you don't do any asset management. Let's say you don't do any protections. You have no controls. Everything's wide open. Is it a problem? I mean, the reality is probably not. Actually, no, it is 100% not a problem until a particular threat goes after it.
Until it's a problem.
Yeah, that's the only time it matters. So what really matters is your response. Are you prepared to respond? That's it. If you do nothing else, just be prepared to respond, right? Because that's where the realized
Can I tell
happens.
you, and when I get into the stats, and I'm like, like less than 20% or less than 30% of SMBs have an incident response plan that they've actually practiced, and yet we all did fire drills as a kid. But now we're going to go build these multi-million-dollar brands and not practice when there's going to be a fire, like when there's going to be a data breach. It's like, oh, we've got a disaster recovery plan. No, I'm not talking about a flood or a fire, right? I'm talking about a data breach. Like people that are floods or fires they're horrible, but they're accidents, right? They're accidents. They weren't there. Here you have threats that are intentionally aiming at you. Like, and you're not going to prepare for that. Like, it won't happen to us.
Yeah, I love the fire drill example because it's why do you do
that's
fire
me
drills?
trying to socialize cybersecurity. Like, I have to boil it down to the things that everybody can understand because,
that's it. But why do we do fire drills? Because if there's a fire, you want to get everybody out safely. So practice, and you don't want to practice at the time it's happening.
No,
right? Because
you're going to dust off that incident response plan and go, okay, in hour one, Carl's supposed to do this. Carl left he quit the job 6 months ago. So who's stepping in right now? Meanwhile, your icons are turning white. Right. Ransomware is spreading by the minute. And you're like, we got to, Bob, you step in.
Exactly.
Like, meanwhile, we're going to blame you when this is all done anyway.
Yeah. Bob,
so
stay here. You're the scapegoat.
Yeah. It's just
by the way, you're panicked. And so nobody makes good decisions when you're, threatened or scared.
Amygdala hijack. It's all, you've got the fight or flight. Yeah. I mean, we've interviewed people that do the negotiations with ransomware gangs. We've interviewed people that are the first responders. And they're like, we've had people have heart attacks. We've had people have pass out on Zoom. We've had people throw up. Yeah. It's a very, very emotional time. I mean, just get locked out of your LinkedIn account and you're like, what's going on? I gotta reset. What's going? And like, that's nothing.
Total panic.
It's nothing. Right.
Yeah. You just misplaced your password, and there's no issue.
Here,
right?
it's on a post-it note somewhere. Let me find it. Right.
Yeah. Now imagine if somebody calls you. This is the thing. Going back to the vulnerabilities, like the vulnerabilities exist somewhere. You got to find them, right? The big ones on your assets that matter. And you don't want the bureau to call you. You don't want to find out that you're breached on the dark net. Like you don't want to find out from some way that you have just realized that it's already out there. And by the way, the clock was ticking, and you don't know when it started, but you know it's been ticking for a while, right? Mm-hmm. Now you got a real problem. So why not push all the way up in the stack and try to get it when it's less of a hassle, right? And less costly to deal with it. Right. And if you don't catch it in development, hire a pen tester, red teamer, to find it, for you, and then let you know when it's on your terms, not the attacker's terms, or, the customer terms that, everybody's upset now because their client data is out. And, oh, by the way, your fines are increasing, your regulatory issues are increasing, your legal fees are increasing, your incident response are increasing, and you're supposed to make rational decisions then? Right. Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Exactly. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Man, well, thank you so much. I could talk to you for hours, man.
I love talking to you. Yeah.
Great discussion, man. I love the questions. I've been typing them down. I've been writing them down because I'm like, these are just great questions. You boiled it down so succinctly. So what's on the horizon? Just as we wrap up here, what's going on? You and the family moving?
Oh no, yeah. So we're staying here in the U.S. The corporate headquarters for Neuvik will stay in the U.S. We've opened up a full EU business to do. It's a lot easier to work inside the ecosphere when you are in the ecosphere. And
sure, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, we provide a service, so we like to be authentic and true. So
and data too, right? The data that they find in the meetings and everything could be done there and stuff. Mm-hmm. Is it going to be London based, or is it Belgium or Germany, or?
So we have an office in The Hague.
Oh, really good.
Yep, in the Netherlands. Yeah. And there's a lot of talk and push now about another one in the UK and just outside of London. Yeah. So we may have a couple.
I'll come visit you there.
Oh, that'd be great. That. Yeah, we'll be there. We're there quite a bit over the next few months, getting things established. It's neat, and it's nice to be able to be authentic in the space and be able to provide a service, because for us, like you mentioned at the top of the episode, it's we're deploying measures that are typically used by the attacker, right. and we have to be trusted to do this, to be able to provide the information to the corporations that need it when they need it and can do it on their terms, rather than the adversary doing it. They're the same techniques, right? They're just, on your terms, not on their terms. And so,
I love it because I just think, adversary emulation, red teaming, penetration testing, like true penetration testing where you actually are hacking in. That is that's some rock star stuff. Because you get in and, the internal group is like, they didn't get in, we didn't see a thing. And you're like, here's the report. And you're like, let me walk through. And you're like, my gosh, we had they're tough conversations.
They are. Now imagine you're a small business trying to sell, or a medium business trying to sell, and you've never done one.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of times we've come in and we've done them. We're like, wow, there's a lot of problems here. And guess what happens? This is the unintuitive consequence of this. Right. The buying team is like, well, you're worth a lot less now because your risk is a lot higher. And the small business is like, wait, what? Right. We have to inherit your risk because you didn't do pen test or red teaming a little while ago and fix the vulnerabilities that are out here that you may or may not have known about. And, you can't blame them for it. They just didn't think about it. Right.
No, I mean, when they started the business, it may not have been a thing.
That's right.
I mean, a lot of these businesses that started in the early 90s, cybersecurity wasn't a thing. I was in a totally different industry. I jumped on board, it seems like forever ago, but it was like the Y2K thing.
Yeah.
How funny was that? We're like, oh, this is going to be a big thing. Meanwhile, I'm like, I don't see anything that's going to come from this, but let's see.
That's right.
So it's so interesting.
Yeah, I was building databases. And for me, it was like, wait a minute. This data has to be protected. Right. And then I was asked how I protect it. And I told him, that is solid grade protection. I'm like, well, I'm signing for the data, so I don't want this stuff out.
That's good.
And the regulations were lower than I liked, so I was like, I got tapped.
Well, that wraps this up. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed our episode. The next one is coming right up. We appreciate you making this an award-winning podcast and downloading on Apple and Spotify and subscribing to our YouTube channel. This is Cybercrime Junkies, and we thank you for watching.